Embrace life's challenges. We all have challenges that we've thought about taking on, whether it's going back to school after a few years, starting a new career in a completely different field, or taking on a physical challenge like myself, whether it's an Ironman or a marathon. But why haven't we taken on these challenges? The answer is because of fear. We have a personal fear that if we don't succeed or come through in the challenge, that we're a failure, and we give ourselves that label. In the same regard, we have a social fear that others will see us as a failure and that they will label us as a failure. And finally, we have the naysayers. These are the people that say you can't do that, or that's impossible, or no one can ever do that. And these people sort of crush your hopes and dreams of taking on this challenge from the get-go. Well, in 2015, myself and Caitlin Miller rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. This had us row from the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, 3,000 miles to Antigua in the Caribbean. Now, this was an unassisted crossing, meaning we had no outside help, we had all of our food and water on board, had no motor, had no sails, solely relied on oar power to get a 23-foot long boat, which was 6 feet wide at the widest point, across the ocean. And in total, it took us 58 days, 5 hours, 6 minutes to make the crossing. Now you can imagine the naysayers when we told our friends and family what we were thinking about doing. Many of them didn't know what to say. Many of them thought that it was impossible. And the first point that I want to make is that you need to believe in yourself, and you need to, if you want to take on a challenge, you need to do it for yourself and worry about what you want to do. And that's not to say that there's going to be that there won't be moments of self-doubt or nervousness in preparation for the challenge or during the challenge. And what worked for me in these moments was that I told myself, I can do this and I will do this. And I just used that motto the whole time. And that helped me get through those moments of self-doubt. The next thing you need to do is you need to commit to the challenge, both mentally and physically, for my challenge. Kayla and I had to prepare our bodies as far as building muscle and putting on weight, which we would eventually lose at the end of the race. I lost a total of 30 pounds. So we had to prepare ourselves for the long grind of a row that this was. At the same time, Caitlin and I were seniors in college. We were the vice president and president of the rowing club, and we were also the men and women's head coach of the rowing club. So we had a full plate of responsibilities. And it would have been easy for us to, take a day off of training because we had other things we needed to do. But we knew that putting one day off of training could possibly turn into two, could possibly turn into a week. And all we're doing is making the challenge that much more difficult. And you don't want to do that because the challenge is already difficult. That's why it's called a challenge. Mentally, we had to go over to England to take classes in first aid at sea navigation, and sea survival. And this would prove very important on the ocean when we dealt with certain situations. The next thing that we needed to do was get a good support group. And this group grew as they saw our commitment to the challenge. They saw how serious we were and that we were committed to seeing this through. And some of those naysayers then jumped on board to the support team and really wanted us to make it across the ocean. And this support group is extremely important during those tough moments on the ocean or in your challenge. And these tough moments in the grand challenge, I like to call mini challenges. These are the bumps in the road or what makes the path to success somewhat difficult. And today I want to focus on 3 mini challenges that were extremely memorable. The first occurred in January of the race, about midway through. Now, the race is purposefully scheduled to start in December because it's after hurricane season. And at this time, we were notified that a storm would be approaching and that we would have to most likely stay in the cabins for an extended period of time. What we didn't know is that Mother Nature was brewing up a Category 1 hurricane, the first hurricane in the Atlantic in January since 1938. Just our luck. But you might ask, what could we do in that situation? Well, there wasn't much we could do. We were at the mercy of the weather, and Caitlin and I have no power over the waves or the conditions. So we had to accept the fact that we were going to be in the cabins for eventually 3 days. And during those 3 days, since I had accepted the conditions as they were, I had to put a positive spin on the situation. And I told myself, at least I'm getting more rest than usual. I wasn't having to go out every 3 hours to go row. I was allowing my muscles and my body to rest and recover. I was able to hydrate. And this positive spin got me through those long 3 days of waiting to go out. And we eventually were able to continue rowing. The next mini challenge that we faced was even more memorable than the hurricane, which is hard to imagine. But this was a life or death situation. It occurred 2 weeks from getting into Antigua. I just had gotten off my night shift of rowing and was ready to get into the cabin, grab a quick snack, and go to sleep. As I'm getting into the cabin, Caitlin told me that we were on a collision course with another vessel. Now, when you're on a collision course with another vessel, there's an alarm that goes off in the cabin, not allowing anybody to sleep. So I was hoping and praying that this would end fairly soon, as it had done from time to time before this instance. But that was not the case. Now, we have a nav light that can be seen from 4 nautical miles away, so we thought, hey, there's no way that this vessel will get within 4 nautical miles, but it did. It then got within 2 nautical miles, and at this moment, we radioed the other ship to ask to make sure that they acknowledged our position, as we knew we were significantly smaller than they were, and that they probably weren't expecting such a tiny vessel to be out on the ocean. Well, we didn't get a response from the other ship. The vessel then gets in within 1 nautical mile. We radio them again, making sure they acknowledge our position. As we can see them on our monitors, we expect that they can see us on their monitors. We get no response. And at this moment, I can see the port and starboard lights of the other vessel getting wider and wider, and I now can appreciate the sheer mass and size of the vessel as it's getting closer and closer, and I'm just starting to look up at it, appreciating how much bigger it is than we are. And at this time, you might think that we're freaking out, but we're in complete training mode, trying to figure out the best situation as to how to get a hold of somebody on that ship so that they can change their course to not run us over. Because there's no way that we can row out of their way. There's no way for me and Caitlin to jump overboard and swim out of their way. The only options are that the ship changes its course or we get run over. And fortunately for us, the ship did change its course, but it got so close that we were able to smell the diesel fuel from its engines. And that was close enough for me and Caitlin. And that smell of the diesel fuel essentially gave us a reality check. And then Caitlin and I immediately freaked out. We were completely in training mode during the whole situation, but once this crisis was averted, we just understood the magnitude of what just happened. We understood how close we were from being completely run over. And that feeling stayed with us over the next day or so. And that motivated us to work even harder to get to Antigua to avoid another situation like that. And finally, the last mini challenge that we faced occurred 400 miles from Antigua. Now, we've been through a hurricane, and we've been through a ship getting deathly close to us and almost running us over. You'd think that we've had enough. Well, things come in threes, and we have another challenge to deal with. At 400 miles away, we had this dry patch, meaning we weren't getting the miles that we were accustomed to getting per 24 hours. Now, we were used to getting 55 to even 60 miles per 24 hours usually. And at this point, we're getting around 10 to 15 miles. Quite drastic difference. And you may think, well, 400 miles is still a long way to go. But if you think about it, we've already traveled around 2,600 miles. So we are in the home stretch of this race. We can taste the burger and fries that we've been promised. We can imagine seeing our families' faces after not seeing them for 2 months and not seeing anybody for 2 months. It is extremely frustrating and demoralizing when you're in the hot sun, sweating, rowing for 3 hours, you get off that shift, you get into the cabin and see that you've gone 2 miles. That is extremely frustrating, and there's nothing that you can do. We were told that the conditions were going to improve over a series of days, and they never did, and that was also frustrating because we were thinking, oh, we're going to get through it this next day, and then the next day is the same thing, only getting 2 miles per shift. That's extremely frustrating. And again, in this moment, I needed to try to remain positive and not let this mini challenge beat me up. So I told myself, at least we're getting closer into Antigua. At least we're making positive gains. We're not staying in the same position. We're not getting blown back. We're getting to Antigua. It might not be as quickly as we like, but we're still getting closer. And after a few days, the conditions finally did improve, and we eventually made it to Antigua. And so what I want to leave you with is a Christopher Columbus quote, and it says, "You can never cross the ocean unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore." And this is a great quote for my challenge because I took the exact same route as Christopher Columbus, but it also points back to the important point of believing in yourself. You need to take that first step in taking on a challenge, and that's believing in yourself, along with committing to the challenge and finding a support group. That'll help you get through the challenge and those mini challenges that you're going to face. If you think about it, if I didn't face the hurricane, the near death experience with the fishing vessel, and that dry patch, my story wouldn't be as great. It would just be I rode across the Atlantic. But the fact that I had those mini challenges and that we got through it, we stayed persistent, we said we could get through it, makes the success that much more sweeter. So you just need to understand that those mini challenges are just a little test within the grand test, and that if you can get through that, you'll get to the finish line. And finally, just know that the human spirit is such a powerful thing. It's so hard to crush the human spirit. So if you stay persistent, keep pushing, keep fighting, you will get to the end. So I encourage you to take on your challenge and embrace life's challenge. Thank you.